Hi, thank you, Nay. Thank you, everyone, for your service. I love you guys. My name's Lucy, and I'm an alcoholic and a recovering drug addict. My sobriety date is July 19th, 2018. I'm going to talk about what it was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. I grew up in Ohio on a small country farm, 8 acres, chickens, cows, and vegetable gardens. I could sing or cry as long as I wanted. We had a swing set and a sandbox, and I helped out with farm chores for an allowance. My mom and dad were both teachers, so in the summer when they had work off, we'd vacation to a Florida beach for a week or two. We were lower middle class, but my grandma lived an hour away. I would lay in my room at night while my parents partied. They smoked and drank, so I started at a young age. But they were normal drinkers. They could leave a bottle of liquor on the counter and not touch it for months. When I was 7, I stole vodka, and it gave me a warm feeling, and I wanted more. It took my fear away. My dad was abusive and violent, and I was punished by being hit. I had an older brother. I have an older brother who I grew up with. He's 4.5 years older than me. So anything he got into, I got into 4 years younger. We both would steal cigarettes from my parents. I would go out to the barn and smoke and hide it. The summer between fifth and sixth grade, I stole a bag of marijuana from my brother and I shared it with my friends, something I later had to make amends for starting my friends on drugs. My parents' friends and all my friends all had a similar lifestyle, so when I was at my friend's house, we would steal our parents' alcohol and cigarettes and hide in barns and use. Later in life, this friend asked me how I stayed sober, and I was honored to try to sponsor her, but she wasn't ready. When my parents weren't paying attention, we were using. There was lots of fighting going on between my dad and mom, and my dad was particularly hard on my brother. This led to my mom divorcing my dad in 96 when I was 12, and we moved across town. I was really upset about the loss and was put into therapy. And just like the program, you have to be honest in therapy. I lied the whole time because I didn't want to be found out about my drug life and my parents, and I feared they would go to jail. I was raised without church, but my dad's side of the family was Catholic and my mom's side was Protestant. They were both from military families, but they became hippies. When I was 14, I lied to my friend's parents about where we were going, and my friend and I went to a drinking party. I went home with a man 3 years older than me, and he could get me smokes and drinks. These years were a blur, but I drank almost every day with him and practically moved in with him. This went on for a while, and I was in psychiatry, and they put me on medicine. And I went manic, so my mom and doctor had me committed to Children's Hospital with a padded room and straitjacket and everything. I hated this, and I wanted to avoid psychiatry my whole life from what my dad had warned me about. But they drug tested me, and I lied about it, but they gave me an option to go to an adolescent rehab or go to jail. Before I practically moved in with my boyfriend, my parents had joint custody of me, and they would fight over who had to take me, which put me in an ill way, and I tried to OD and kill myself on psychological medicine. I was flown to UC Hospital and lived through it. That was 1999, I think. This changed my dad's and I's relationship. He no longer welcomed me in his house because he had to call 911. I wasn't a normal drinker. I'd drink until the bottles were gone, or I was puking or passed out. When the doctors put me on medicine, I just mixed it with alcohol, and it made me very ill. They diagnosed me with mental illness, but I couldn't stop drinking. My mom and dad gave me rides to adolescent rehab until I graduated, but that's when I was introduced to AA, and I had to get 2 signatures a week. The same guys that were there 20 years ago are still there today, and I just love them. But I told them I couldn't pick up a 24-hour chip because I drank the night before, and they told me I was always welcome, even when I'm out of rehab, and I could bridge the gap. But I didn't continue that and went back to the races. In 8th grade, I threatened a girl and was expelled. I used I had using buddies and partied pretty hard in high school. At one point, I thought if I quit all the other drugs and just got high and drank, I was working a program. I went to public school until my junior year. I was expelled from school and went to private Christian school for a year until I could go back to my public school and get my diploma. When I graduated from high school, it was a tragic time because that boyfriend I had died from drinking and driving the same week of graduation and the same week as my 18th birthday. I didn't want to work. I didn't want to go to college. I just wanted to party. And after he died, I kind of had a sex problem and I got with my girlfriend's boyfriend and I got into cocaine for a little while. And then I had my next boyfriend who I saw on and off for a few years. But my drug use and alcohol use were out of control. I was driving by then. I forgot to mention when I was a kid, I did soapbox derby with my dad. I won in 1997. I'm in the Hall of Fame, but I ended up using drugs and hooking up with people at the race also when I was 15. And I started working. I worked at a hardware store for 9 months, but was fired because I was drunk. I did a work study program in high school, so I got graded on my work. I went through a few jobs and I used to cope. I was emotionally out of control and would drink and use to try to feel better. And I was at these jobs, I was fired either because I was drunk or sick from drinking or just didn't show up from the night before. I went through a few jobs around Oxford and Hamilton. When I was 20, I fell asleep in a trailer and woke up to the police saying I was trespassing and I got an underage drinking charge. I got a lawyer and I had to do community service and alcohol classes, but this still didn't stop me. I still continued to use, and I remember a doctor had me on psych meds, and I turned 21, and I was going from guy to guy in a matter of weeks. I was practically homeless, staying at these guys' houses and in my car because I couldn't follow my mom's rules of the house or get along with her. And partying and using all the time. I went from bar to bar to my mom's house for my 21st birthday. I would go to the bar at 10 in the morning after I turned 21 and be drunk by noon, or start at 4 p.m. and go all night. That is until I wrecked my car and woke up in jail. I had hit a tree in the middle of the morning. That led me to 30 days in jail, lost my license for 90 days, and 2 years good probation. And I was court ordered to go to a long-term treatment center. And this is in North Carolina in 2006. My grandma paid for it. It was expensive. I went to this farm that was for people with mental illness and substance abuse issues. I didn't want to be there and was weak from not eating right, but I eventually had fun and got my first 10 months sober. I think that sober environment really helped me stay sober. Then I moved to Asheville, North Carolina to live with my rehab friends and try the geographic cure. But I can't run away from my own problems because I am my own problem. I lived above a bar and relapsed. Then I got kicked out and had to move in with a friend from a community house that I lived in. There were 123 meetings a week in Asheville. I was going to meetings sometimes, but I didn't do the work, so I kept relapsing. I was still prescribed a medicine and still went to therapy. I tried having roommates, but drama got in the way of that. And when I went to that rehab, my second boyfriend left me after he proposed, but he said it was on terms if I came home in 2 months, but I was court ordered to go, so I had to go. I started going to college. The treatment center wanted me to make sure I was doing something good instead of going back to use. I went to vet tech school for 3 years, but switched majors to human service technology. I had to withdraw from classes because I was put in the hospital. And in 2009, I went to a park and met my soon-to-be husband. He was in AA, and we went to meetings together. We were together for 8 years, then got married, and we were married for 4. Then he left me. And I divorced him. He graduated college and I graduated a 2-year school after 8 years. That taught me persistence, never give up. I relapsed with him a few times. He ended up relapsing and using heavy. He spent a lot of time out where I don't know what he was doing. We tried Al-Anon and our insurance didn't cover marriage counseling. I moved like 14 times. I kept getting kicked out. After college, I got a job in my field and I got a sponsor. I had had a sponsor until step 3. She ended up drinking. Then my second sponsor got me through step 10. And after that, I had weaned myself off Klonopin and ended up in an institution and stayed in a group home in Alexander County in the mountains until I moved back in with my boyfriend. And then my third sponsor, I asked her if she'd be my sponsor because she was also in a relationship with someone in the program, and I wanted to know how to make it work. She's now passed away, and so are many of my friends who died from using drugs and alcohol, but she lit a fire under my ass. She had me do 90-90, call her every day. When I was having a hard time, she would tell me to do something practical like do the dishes or pray or meditate. And she had me start the day with a gratitude list and the serenity prayer, the third step prayer, the 7th step prayer, and the 11th step prayer. And that's what I'm closing out with after I talk is the 11th step prayer. But I wrote a letter to God and I worked the steps. I had my first year sober, and that's still my sobriety date today. When my husband started using, we began fighting, and I moved back to Ohio to get help from my parents. I didn't expect he'd follow me, but he did, and he moved in with me. But shortly after, he went off his meds and left me. I was working in retail, and I got mentally sick and ended up back in the mental hospital and lived in a group home for a year, but I did all of that sober. I got a divorce from my now ex-husband. I struggle with homelessness sometimes. I'm in between the poverty line and homelessness. I bounce back and forth. I've always stayed in apartments or trailers, but rent always took up all of my money. My husband worked some, but he'd use my money, and my parents didn't approve. I had to pay marital debt. While I was still in Asheville, I had 2 jobs until my car broke down. Then I got COVID and I had to quit my job because they were giving me too many hours. I haven't heard from my ex-husband in 3 years, but the last letter he wrote, he said he'd feel better in the dirt. When I was a teenager, I was put on government benefits. In Asheville, I worked in a food pantry for a year for my kind of internship for my school. I'm on a disability check now, and I still take meds as prescribed by my doctor and have 6 years, 10 months sober. I went to my group home TLC groups for a year and not AA, but I got a new boyfriend and I was hanging out with drinkers and I was obsessing over a drink again. So I found a new spiritual family from a text of a woman I know in the program. That was something my sponsor had me do, was build a network of women in the program. I got a new sponsor and I'm on step 4 again. I haven't been in the mental hospital in 3 years and I've been living on my own for 2 years. Admitting I was an alcoholic was hard at first, but I couldn't deny the problems I was having. I had loss of jobs, relationships, pregnancies. I had to do jail time and I had car wrecks. But finally, I surrendered that I couldn't do it alone and I needed help. My higher power has evolved from qualities of friend would be to believing in what I call God, and to do His will, I need to work the steps. I put my rounds, my inventory, and admitted them all to my sponsor. I was so relieved. I wanted to be forgiven, and I gained compassion for humans because I realized everyone just wants to be forgiven. And I realized I had character defects of self-righteousness, gossiping, judging, anger, lust, pride, and jealousy. and I was ready for them to be removed. I went back to my resentment list and made a list of people who I had harmed and made amends. Then then I knew how to work the steps and live 10, 11, and 12. I think it's important to have a home group, so service work like make coffee and clean ashtrays. I did that a lot, chairing, or just filling a seat. I'm not working right now, but I help my mom out now and take walks in the woods. My living amends to my mom was to not go back out and to continue school. I chaired one women's group on Zoom. I've only told my story twice before. Oh, I also think reading AA literature is important. I've read Living Sober, Drop the Rock, Believing in False Gods, Coming of Age, Big Book, As Bill Sees It, Daily Reflections. I recommend all those books. I went to AA meetings almost every day and the treatment center groups like art therapy. When I was in my group home, I walked 2 miles to get to a meeting. I don't drive anymore. My health doesn't allow it. People from the meetings would give me rides too. That's something great about AA is that there's always someone willing to help. One was my temporary sponsor. It's important to have a sponsor too. But my worst day sober is still better than my best day drunk, and I'm a grateful alcoholic. I hope this helps someone. Thanks for letting me share. The end.